Have you ever looked at yourself in the mirror, not to fix your hair or touch up your lipstick, but just to look? And in that small, quiet moment, something felt off. Not the wrinkles, not really your age, but the feeling that your eyes were slowly fading beneath the hair color that once made you feel like yourself. A shade that once lit you up at 40 may now be the very thing making you look 10 years more tired at 60. No one tells you that, because no one dares to, but in this video, I will. I'll speak for that part of you that wonders why your reflection no longer feels like home. I'll share 5 shades that are still beloved, still trending, but quietly weighing down your face, dulling your presence, and pulling you away from the softness you deserve. More importantly, I'll also show you the hair color for older women that brings back that gentle light you thought you'd lost. Because sometimes what dims us isn't time. It's holding on to something that no longer reflects who we are becoming. 1. Jet black. When loyalty turns into an invisible chain. Every morning, Marlene still walks into the bathroom before anyone else in the house is awake. Not because she craves the quiet, but because she wants to see herself in the mirror without being seen. There's a subtle difference between the two. She still brushes her jet black hair slowly, evenly, as if each strand holds a timeline that refuses to end. And in truth, it does. That hair has been with her for over 40 years since her days teaching literature in high school, standing at the front of the class with a white ruler and a voice that commanded attention. Back when she was known as Ms. Taylor Sharp, composed, and always in control. That deep black hair used to be her cloak of confidence. It made her feel defined, unmistakably herself. But time passed. The classroom faded. The school bell now rings only in memory. And each day, Marlene feels herself growing quieter within the very color that once made her shine. She's not sad. She doesn't even feel old. But there's something tight in her chest when the bathroom light hits the mirror just right, like the face staring back isn't wrong, just no longer vibrant. There's something no one says out loud. Jet black hair carries a visual weight. It outlines everything what we want to keep and what we wish would disappear. On skin that's over 60, often more translucent, thinner with undertones of blue or gray, that kind of contrast can be stark. It doesn't soften the features, it sharpens them. And that unintentional sharpness can make a once familiar face seem unfamiliar, too rigid, too cold. That's one of the most common hairstyle mistakes that age you mistaking boldness for presence and contrast for clarity. Marlene used to believe that keeping her black hair meant she was keeping herself, but no one told her that what she was holding on to might be exactly what was pushing everything else away. As if her hair was speaking so loudly, her face didn't get a word in. Maybe what she feared wasn't the color change itself, but the thought that if her hair stopped being black, the shadow of Ms. Taylor might vanish too. But here's the truth. Strength doesn't come from dark colors. Definition doesn't have to be harsh. After 60, it's often the softer light that makes us more approachable and more beautiful without trying too hard. When Marlene first switched to an espresso brown or rich coffee hue with depth, but none of the heaviness, she was surprised that she didn't immediately notice the change in the mirror. But she saw it in her daughter's eyes when she visited, in her husband's smile when she walked into the kitchen, and even in her own laugh, something about it felt gentler. Not so sharp, not so distant. Her new hair didn't take her back to 30, but it helped her feel at ease at 68. And that's the kind of hair color for older women that actually helps them look younger after 50, not by pretending to be younger, but by allowing who they are now to come forward more clearly. For anyone who has long clung to jet black, switching to a softer tone isn't giving up. It's stepping out of an armor that has grown too heavy and slipping into something lighter, something warm, something that still holds the memories, but lets the real person inside breathe again. Sometimes the magic doesn't come from a dramatic change. Sometimes it begins the moment you stop trying so hard to hold on to a version of yourself that has already done its job. Pause just for a moment and ask yourself, what color truly reflects who you are today? 2. Platinum blonde. When bright no longer means young, Judith had always been a woman drawn to light. She hung sheer curtains on every window, chose ivory bed linens, and sipped morning tea from a white porcelain mug, believing that brightness could somehow lift the spirit back to life. And one day, after turning 60, when silvery strands began to appear at her roots, she thought, why not go fully light? Platinum blonde, a name that shimmered like winter moonlight, became a promise. If her hair was beginning to change, she'd let it go completely white, fully luminous so no one could see the boundary of age. At first, it was a relief. No more covering gray. No more frequent salon visits like when she dyed her hair brown. But what Judith didn't expect was how that brightness slowly made her disappear in family photos. She looked at a Christmas picture, standing beside the tree with her whole family. Twinkling lights, red scarves, warm laughter, and there she was. Somehow distant, even while standing in the middle. Her once bright eyes and softly rosy skin had become muted, faded, as if the light in her hair had blurred all her features into a pale haze. The challenge with platinum blonde after 60 isn't always the color itself, it's how it fails to see the subtle changes in mature skin. Skin after 60 becomes more translucent, delicate, carrying cool tones that aren't always obvious faint blue beneath the eyes, a touch of yellow along the cheekbones, quiet sunspots near the temples. Hair color for older women like platinum, with its cool bluish cast, unintentionally magnifies those shifts. Not in a flattering way, but in a way that steals warmth from the face. And without warmth, the face loses its anchor. The softness vanishes into glare, leaving an overall effect that feels washed out, like a morning mist that never fully lifts. Worse still, platinum blonde is not a natural evolution. It requires bleach, toning, maintenance, and aging hair, already more fragile often, lacks the strength for that harsh cycle. Judith tried her best. She had her own color chart, special shampoos, even a dedicated towel to avoid dulling the tone. But one day, after blow-drying, she ran her fingers through her hair and felt nothing. Not dryness, but weightlessness, as if it was no longer her real hair. It felt like synthetic silk detached from her face, holding no emotion from her touch. That was when she chose to return to light, but this time, it was the golden light of late afternoon. She tried beige blonde, a soft ivory tone infused with warmth. Not too yellow, not too white, but when sunlight kissed it, the strands shimmered like satin brushing against her cheek. No one said much. But in the next photo, her grandson's birthday, she stood amid the colorful chaos of family. And this time, her eyes didn't fade into the background. They sparkled, alive. Still Judith, not trying to look younger after 50, but simply beautifully present. Because sometimes it's not brightness that makes us glow, it's finding the tone that lifts us gently, rather than asking us to disappear. And if you're staring into the mirror, wondering why your gaze feels dimmer these days, it may not be because you've changed. It might just be that your hair no longer reflects what you want the world to see. 3. Vivid red. When personality starts to overshadow natural beauty. Barbara always entered a room as if she had been there all along. No need to speak loudly. No need for flashy clothes. Her vibrant red hair, the coppery cherry tone she'd worn for decades, was enough to make people turn their heads a second time. For Barbara, red was never just a color. It was a statement, a memory from her years as a creative director at a local fashion house. A symbol of her time roaming through Paris, Milan, and New York with nothing but a small suitcase and her brick red stilettos. Red was her voice, her fire, her identity. And when she turned 65, Barbara didn't feel the need to change a thing. She kept that bold red hue, believing she was still being true to herself. Until one evening, at her daughter's wedding. The ballroom bathed in warm golden light, laughter ringing through the air, family photos being snapped. Later, when Barbara looked at one of the pictures, she paused. Not because she looked older, not because of wrinkles, but because she couldn't find her eyes. The hair, once a spark, had become a wall. So vivid it blurred every detail on her face. So dominant, it left nowhere for the eye to rest. There's something about that red, especially beside mature skin, that no longer glows, but instead becomes harsh. Because at this stage, skin isn't even toned anymore. There's a touch of redness on the cheeks, fine visible capillaries, and subtle shifts of light and shadow we barely notice ourselves. A vivid red like cherry or fire engine amplifies all of that. It doesn't blend. It contrasts, and when a color takes up that much space, the eyes can no longer anchor the face. Barbara realized people weren't looking into her expression anymore. They were being pulled into her hair like a flame demanding attention. And in that effort to be seen, she herself had disappeared. No one denies that red is bold. It's a color of passion, of individuality, of women who refuse to be silenced. But after a certain age, boldness can sometimes eclipse the quiet elegance growing within. Rather than sticking with vivid cherry, Barbara experimented with mahogany, a deep red-brown, rich like aged wine. When the morning sun touched it, it shimmered softly like autumn leaves about to fall. Not blazing, but radiant. And in that softness, her eyes emerged again. No effort, no performance. Just presence enough for someone to truly see her. The truth is, what makes a woman look younger after 50 isn't always about color that shouts. It's about a color that knows when to step back so the face can soften, breathe, and tell its story fully. Because radiance at this age isn't about volume, it's about the kind of beauty that makes someone stop, listen, and linger, not just glance and move on. Sometimes you don't need a head full of fire to keep your identity. You just need a gentle glow one that still feels like you, without having to fight time to prove it. 4. Dark purple, when interesting turns into out of tune. Linda was always the one to bring a spark of surprise. At book club dinners, she'd hand each member a handwritten calligraphy note with the title of the novel they'd just finished. At summer concerts, she'd stand in the crowd wearing a deep purple silk scarf, smiling brightly as if the music had been written just for her. So it came as no surprise when, at 68, Linda decided to dye her hair dark purple. "Because I've never been predictable," she said, "and I'm not ready to fade into the background." At first, the color truly set her apart. It caught the morning light through her kitchen window like a streak of late sunset. She felt young again, not in age, but in intention, in being deliberate with her presence. But one evening, as she caught her reflection under the soft yellow light of her living room, she paused. Something didn't sit right. Her face, once delicate and expressive, seemed to retreat into shadow. The purple, once serene now, emphasized the darkness around her eyes and mouth. Not in a flattering way, but in a way that made her features appear pulled down. Linda tried changing the lighting. She tried a new pair of wireframe glasses to add definition. But everything still felt like it was drowning beneath a cold, unfamiliar tone. The hair, once her bold declaration, had become a backdrop too strong, amplifying every tiny shift in her skin without mercy. The problem wasn't that purple isn't beautiful. It was that after 60, the skin starts speaking to the world differently. It becomes more translucent, more sensitive to how light hits it, and carries its own quiet palette cool grays under the eyes, soft yellowing along the jaw, shadows that no foundation can truly erase. Dark purple with its bluish undertones creates a harsh contrast, making the skin seem thinner, more drained of life. Rather than enhancing her personality, it disconnected the whole look like her face and her hair were two songs in different keys. That's one of the lesser-known but very real style mistakes after 60 choosing vibrancy without harmony. And then came the fading. A few weeks in, that gorgeous eggplant hue began shifting dulling into a smoky haze, sometimes even a greenish gray. Linda, who once adored surprises, now found herself constantly refreshing, toning, touching up just to stop her hair from feeling like it was betraying her own reflection. One afternoon, she sat flipping through travel photos with an old friend and paused on an image taken in a lavender field. Ironically, the flower's soft, sparse, whispering purple made her feel more at ease than the bold color on her head. And, in that quiet moment, she knew it was time for a change. Not to erase her uniqueness, but to soften it. Linda tried a gentle lilac smoke highlight layered over her natural silver strands. When the light touched it, it shimmered like mist. No effort, no proclamation. Just presence timed gracefully, without force. After 60, not everyone needs to be the most interesting woman in the room. Sometimes being the one who makes others feel peaceful just by being there. That's a kind of beauty all its own. Linda understood that. And for the first time in years, she stood before the mirror and smiled, not because she looked new, but because at last everything was in tune. 5. Unusual green. When modern starts to feel like trying too hard, Charlene was always the type to say, "Why not?" Instead of "should I?" She learned to ride a motorcycle at 58, practiced headstand yoga at 61, and at 65, Charlene declared, "I'm dyeing my hair green, not neon TikTok green." A deep mossy shade, bold, artistic, slightly vintage. A smart choice, she told herself, not a rebellious one. The first week, she got curious looks at her usual cafe. Strangers struck up conversations. Her nieces and granddaughters admired her. And Charlene, riding that wave of surprise, felt more youthful than she had in years. But then came week 3. That's when she noticed it. The mossy olive glow had faded into something muddy, halfway between ash and dull yellow. The roots where the silvers grew were now a visible boundary. And people's reactions shifted too. Less intrigued, more uncertain, as if they didn't know what to do with this unexpected boldness. Charlene began to feel like she was holding up a performance, a version of the woman who refuses to age, rather than simply living in her own truth. One early morning, as sunlight streamed through the trees, she caught her reflection in the bakery window. For the first time, her eyes no longer connected with her hair. It felt like two old friends who had drifted apart, standing side by side, yet not walking the same path. The green, though interesting, had no natural place in human hair pigment. And, because of that, it created distance a layer between me and my real face. By the time you reach 60 and beyond, the skin tends to carry muted tones from within, a bit of soft yellow, subtle red undertones, or faint gray around the edges. Cool greens like teal moss or emerald can magnify those uneven undertones, making the face look tired or even slightly ill. This is one of those hidden hairstyle mistakes that age you, not because the color is wrong, but because it overwhelms the skin's own quiet story. On top of that, green dyes often fade unpredictably into murky browns, dull grays, or brassy yellows. The constant cycle of bleaching, toning, fixing, and re-dyeing wears down more than the strands. It erodes the spontaneity and joy that inspired the change in the first place. Charlene realized she didn't need modern imposed from the outside. She needed something quietly fresh from within. And for the first time in ages, she walked into the salon without a mask. She looked her stylist in the eye and said, "I want to keep a hint of mischief, but not at the cost of my eyes." Her stylist understood immediately. Together they chose an ash-brown base with a whisper of smoky green, barely noticeable under normal light, but shimmering gently like softened steel when the sun touched it. No more pushing for approval. No more holding up a version of different. Just a shade subtle enough to reflect something deeper, freedom, without explanation. And, from that moment on, the way people looked at Charlene changed. There was no confusion, no hesitation. They no longer stopped at her hair. They saw her. That was when she understood. Modernity doesn't live in the pigment. It lives in the feeling of being yourself without having to announce it. And so, we close the journey through 5 once-beloved shades colors that were powerful, expressive, brave, but now gently released. Not because they were wrong, but because they no longer reflect the truest part of the woman today. A woman who has walked through enough light to finally choose her warmth with intention. Maybe no one else noticed it, but you did. That today, when your fingers gently tucked your hair behind your ear, something felt lighter. Not because you changed your hair color, but because, for the first time in a long while, you quietly wondered whether the color you've been holding on to is the very thing holding you back. There's no need to rush. But if anything in this video made you pause, even for just a fleeting thought, leave me a single number below. Just whoa if you've never tried to change, 1 if you have, even once. You don't need to explain. I'll read it. And I'll understand. And if you're somewhere in between, unsure whether to hold on or let go, not knowing if it's time to try something softer, what would you like the next video to explore? A conversation about the hair color for older women that brings the light back to your eyes? Or perhaps a gentle journey through haircuts for women over 60 that soften your features without losing the strength you've always carried. If any of this resonates with you, just stay a little longer. There's no rush. This space was made for you right at the moment you're ready.